Good morning. Welcome to Conversations with Chris. This month we are talking about finances. And as we have been gathering together this month, spending some time just talking about the basic things of being good money managers for God and what that actually looks like with financial contentment. And one of the things that's really important with financial contentment is getting rid of the clutter in our lives. And this ability, because sometimes we have to radically get rid of clutter that is in our life, because it's the clutter in our lives that are clogging up our financial situation. So if you watch TV, you would know that there's all kinds of reality TV shows that have to deal with, you know, the excess that we have in the West with our material possessions. So there's like Hoarder Hero, Extreme Clutter, and there's all kinds of home organizational talk shows and magazines that are out there about how to declutter your home. Um, and the reason why is because the physical possessions in our life are abundant, and they clutter our lives so much that we can't even make good decisions. And sometimes the clutter of our lives and the possessions that we have actually distract from us being good financial managers instead of enhancing our lives. And so we just need to realize that these physical possessions that we have in our life are directly related to our faith and connected with our faith and connected to our financial ability. So let me just define clutter for us as we get going and talking about this. So clutter is a messy collection of objects and possessions, and it's a condition of disorder or even overcrowding whereby we fill our lives with so many possessions that it's untidy, it's messy, and it's overflowing with stuff. And there are a number of things, and some of these things become great when they're kept in a good situation, but some of them become incredibly difficult to manage and to take care of. So some of the list of things that can clutter our lives are heirlooms, you know, achievements, emotions, knickknacks. We can go yard sailing, spending all our money on yard sailing. Money can actually be clutter in our lives. The stuff that we purchase around our house, whether it's the TVs, the electronics, the computers, the gadgets, all of these things that are sort of the outcome of having financial freedom, so to speak, or whether it's toys like boats and RVs, and all of this stuff can just bring us to a place where we've got so much clutter in our life. And here's the thing, here's the tie in to finances, okay? When we have all of this clutter in our life, it actually takes money to look after all of that stuff. And that can actually be a drain on your finances. So, for instance, you got a lot of stuff. Where does it go? Because it doesn't fit in the house. It goes into the garage. Well, the garage gets full. It doesn't fit in the garage anymore. Where does that stuff go? Oh, it ends up in a storage unit. Storage unit costs you money. See, all of this stuff just ties in together to your finances. And so, how we manage clutter in our life and how we look at our finances and why we have money, and what where we need to be spending that money and what we're responsible for is incredibly important when we're talking about possessions, because possessions are a result of finances. And so if we have a lot of finances, more than likely we have a lot of possessions. And if we don't manage our finances well, we may have even more we might have more possessions, and those possessions don't actually do us any good in our lives. So let's let go of some of the clutter and get a big picture idea about how do we actually manage the material stuff that we have? Well, there's a place in the Bible where God actually speaks directly to this, where we see um, what we need to do when it comes to clutter. And I'm just going to read this. This is in John, the book of John, 1 verse 2, or chapter 2, verse 15. Okay? Somebody just commented they wish the volume was louder. Well, I can talk a little louder. Hopefully that would help. Um, hopefully it will be a little bit better. I know we have had some problems technically here the last little while, but anyway, we're overcoming. So hopefully it will work. So in First John, second chapter, verse 15, it says this: "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride in possessions, is not from the Father, but is from the world." Let's just unpack what this verse is saying. Well, this verse is actually saying that these pride that we have in possessions and the desire of our eyes to want things and the desire of our flesh to have things actually comes from a love of the world, not actually a love of God. And so if we want to declutter some of these things that are of the world out of our lives, then we actually need to have a love of God. We need to extravagantly love God as opposed to love the world. So it doesn't mean that the things of the world are actually bad. It's talking about the systems of the world that exclude God from it. And as a believer, I'm actually called to respond to God's love. And a love for the world is having a strong affection that is more like an interest and enthusiasm towards something. That's what happens in our lives when we want all of this stuff here. We've got this strong like and affection for these things, and we've got an enthusiasm towards this, and so we spend all kinds of money in that, and we just need to get to the place where we actually have this growth of love, um, and it's so much more about the attitude that we have towards our stuff, um, and honor God with it. Uh, because even a good thing may rob a believer from the enjoyment of God's love, and that's actually important for us to realize that we need to declutter some of this stuff out of our lives, um, because we need to have this extravagant love for God, not for the things and the possessions of this world. And if we have, and this is why these things are all tied together, having a plan for your financial management and at the same time being content with what you have, because if you're not content, you build clutter. You build all kinds of clutter in your life where it's robbing you of the enjoyment of what God has actually uh, given wealth for. And so we need to declutter these things out of our lives so that we actually are looking at God in a proper perspective where we actually love Him. And it's very clear as John is writing this letter to the church, he just says, if you love the world, the love of God is not in you. So let's not love the world. And we just need to be reminded that the love of the world comes with the love of possessions. And sometimes the clutter is there because we've got sort of sidetracked and we're loving the possessions more than we're actually loving God. So we need to correctly value the world, and we just need to realize that the world is temporary, and it's only here for a while. And as we are only here for a while, our home, our eternal home is in the heavens. And so let's make sure that our desire not on the possessions and the clutter of this world, but that we're thinking of the world to come. And these desires that are so evident in our world, where we desire the things of sinful behavior and we desire things to look good, like the lust of the eyes, the eye candy, the love of beauty, divorced from the love of God's goodness, and just getting away from that, and not having pride in our possessions. And really, it literally means arrogant assumption. Um, and possessions mean things like land and livestock. We've moved so far away from an agricultural livestock, but houses and cars, cottages, boats, RVs, TVs, all of those possessions are these things that we just have to put in proper perspective. And they can actually even be non-tangible things like well-being, and we may spend a ton of money on our health and exercise, or traveling to different places, staying active by hiking and ziplining. And so there's all of these things that can dwindle away at our finances. And if we're not correctly valuing all of this stuff, then we can get caught up in this non-financial contentment of the world, and we're so bent of about these possessions. So what we need to realize, here's the thing we need to realize, is we need to realize that all of these possessions, all of the things of this world, are passing away. And every great nation in history has been conquered by another nation. Hello. And sometimes we hope that the lifestyle we enjoy in Canada will stay the same for our whole lifetime, for our kids and our grandkids. And what we're saying is that we're not acknowledging that in this world, the nation of Canada someday is going to pass away. And all of our possessions are going to pass away with it too. So if all of our possessions are going to pass away, and if you have possessions, you kind of know that cars rust out, houses break down, things get old, they need to be repainted, they need to be refreshed. It's just, we just need to be mindful that this is where possessions are. And when we actually have possessions in this place that they're going to pass away, it's actually a lot easier to declutter them, to get them out of your life, and to not, because you kind of go, well, if I get an ATV and it breaks down, then I might have to fix it. That's going to cost me more money. So maybe I can't afford the ATV because I can't afford to fix it if it breaks down. That's great logic. That's great conversations to have, because finances, possessions, contentment, our plan for our finances, man, it's all wrapped together. And so if we're going to be good money managers, then we actually have to get rid of the clutter that's in our life, and having a proper perspective, God's perspective, on possessions that are around. And actually, the Bible actually encourages us to pray for these desires of these possessions and all of the things that makes us want to have some of these things to pass away, and to not be so informative in our life. So hopefully that will happen in your life, and in my life too, because it doesn't really matter. I can tell you these things, but I have to put them in practice too. So the other thing that part of decluttering is that we actually have to submit ourselves, or want to fulfill God's will in this world. Um, Sometimes we end up being so caught up in our possessions, because if we have a cottage, we've got to go to a cottage. If we have a boat, then uh, hopefully we're using that boat and enjoying that boat. But those things can actually be a burden, and they can actually cause us not to fulfill the will of God. And God actually says that there's a number of things that we are to do, um, in terms of His will, that are important. And if we're missing those things, we can actually miss out and have this love of money over a proper perspective on money. So let's let's just be reminded that clutter in our life is actually a sign that we've overcrowded our life with things that don't matter compared to God. And that actually matters a lot to God, where He actually wants us to be living in this place where we are honoring Him with our finances, first and foremost. And if we're not honoring Him, over time, we're going to find that we get all kinds of problems, clutter, noise coming up in our life that just overwhelms us. And we're not actually doing what God has called us to do. So just to kind of recap, if we're going to get rid of clutter in our lives, we need to stop having this um, pride in possessions. We we need to do God's will for our lives, which is seek Him first, and all the things of this world will be added to us, not because we have it, but because God sustains us. God fulfills all of our needs, and to realize that I just need to have a love of God instead of this love for the world, and that my possessions, all my possessions, are going to pass away. So if they're all going to pass away, let's declutter them now. And if we've got time to declutter them, just go ahead and declutter all of those things. Now, maybe you're watching today and you've got some questions. Maybe you're watching after this is done and you're not watching it live. You've got some questions, just send them in. We'd be glad to answer any of those questions. But if you've got a question, you want to throw it up there. And it would be great to even think and reflect on it, what it actually means to live a life that's decluttered. And one of the things that is incredibly obvious when you travel around and you see the wealth disparities between rich countries and poor countries is that you see that there's clutter. You see that there's clutter in the lives of people. You see that they've got more than what they actually need in their house, in their garage, and in their storage unit, compared to those that don't have anything. And it's actually a lot easier to be a minimalist when you don't have any money. When you have money, it's a really hard to be a minimalist because the things of this world are so attractive to our eyes, and we think we deserve it sometimes, and we take pride in our possessions, and so it actually drives us to this place to create more clutter. So let's just have God's wisdom here, and hopefully we can apply some of these principles of not loving the things of the world, getting rid of the possessions, because possessions are going to pass away anyway, and just honor God with our possessions, and hopefully that will help us have this financial contentment that we talked about last week, and be able to live our life in a way where we're managing the money that we do have for God's glory and for God's honor, because He's the one that's given it to us in the first place. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully you're able to apply some of these things, and just declutter your life from possessions that overwhelm us at times. So great to be with you. Just a reminder, next week we're going to be talking on Christmas Eve, the 24th of December, and answering some questions that have come in. And the following times we will be just taking a break, and then in January coming back, we're going to be talking about anxiety, and that's going to be a great topic. And hopefully we'll have some guests come in to talk to us about anxiety and how to cope with anxiety. I know last week I said that we would have an accountant here, but his schedule got changed and he wasn't able to be here. So anyway, he just caught up busy in doing accounting, which is what he actually does as a professional chartered accountant. So good to be together today. Hopefully this is providing some help, and we will talk to you again. Look forward to connecting with you again on Conversations with Chris. Have a great day. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you again.